Hello and welcome to the Student Empowerment Through SEL in Music Education webinar series. Thank you for being here for episode 9, the series finale, Amplifying Student Agency Through SEL and Music Education. My name is Rebecca Hoff from Save the Music Foundation, and Save the Music is proud to partner with the Center for Arts Education and Social Emotional Learning to produce this free webinar series. And lastly, this work was made possible through the support of KKR COVID Response Fund, a sponsored project of Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors. We thank them for making this possible. And now it's my pleasure to introduce you to Bob Morrison, the Executive Director of the Center for Arts Education and Social Emotional Learning. Bob.
Hey, thank you very much, Rebecca, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to our culminating session for our series on arts education and social emotional learning, focusing our efforts on student empowerment through SEL in music education. And tonight's direction that we're going to take, I think, is a really good one, where we can focus on student agency, but we're doing so by bringing back some of our all-stars from some of the prior sessions. And before we get started, I just wanted to thank all of you for supporting the series and making this such a vibrant community over the past 9 months. We started back in September. This is episode number 9. And we're really excited to present this for all of you and grateful for the opportunity to showcase the real important and life-changing connections between social emotional learning and music education and how that can transform in a positive way the lives of our students. And with that, I would like to turn it over to our cruise director for this evening will be Dr. Scott Egger, and I will be jumping in and out and monitoring the chat and Q&A for the session as well. So Scott, take it away.
Bob, Save the Music, KKR, I cannot begin to express what an honor it's been to be part of this project. It has been, for me, opening on the number of perspectives that we've had across the 8 prior episodes. And we realized as we got to the end that maybe to our own fault that we've created silos. Well, this episode is dedicated to breaking down those silos, that music education and humanity doesn't just live in the choir classroom. It doesn't just live in the elementary classroom, and it doesn't just live in hip hop. So we've invited 3, as Bob said, rock stars back to live in dialogue, to answer some very, very tough questions that I know we're all grappling with in our classrooms, and how we're understanding this world and how we can help our students build an identity, belonging, and agency. I was joking with the panelists as we were coming on today and said, no one likes to have biographies read about them. So I said, I promise you, I'm not going to do it today. You get to introduce yourselves and tell us what is at your heart. So I'm going to ask the panelists one at a time, starting with the iconic and unbeatable Alicia Lee, to tell us a little bit about herself and how social and emotional learning is embedded, intentional, and sustained in your world. Alicia, welcome.
Thank you so much, Scott and Bob and Chiho and Rebecca from Save the Music. I'm so excited to be here. I see some of my friends are here in the attendee room. So I'm excited for this conversation and to learn beside Purple and Franklin tonight. My name is Alicia Lee. I'm joining you from my home in Baltimore City, which is on the ancestral lands of the Piscataway people. And I use she and her pronouns. I get excited about the state of arts education when I visit classrooms all across the state of Maryland, where I have been working at the Maryland State Department of Education for the last several years, leading the Fine Arts Office. And when people say, oh, arts education is dying or that doesn't have support, that's not what we see. We see that states are strongly supporting, especially Maryland, strongly supporting arts education, music, dance, theater, visual art, and media arts. And I get excited when I visit classrooms and I see teachers that are moving out of the way, that are making room for the lived experiences and priorities of their students instead of filling the room with themselves or with the artists of the canon or something like that, right? And so for me, SEL is hand in hand with culturally responsive pedagogy. It goes hand in hand with an anti-racist lens and approach. It goes hand in hand with those pieces because SEL and culturally responsive pedagogy and anti-racism are all about centering the human experience in the way that we move forward and on the way we teach students and the way we interact with them. And what better place is there than music making? So tonight I'm hoping to share a little bit about the work that I've seen of other teachers and supervisors throughout the state of Maryland, but also in my own work. I continue to teach, and once I moved out of the classroom to do administrative work, I continue to be a practitioner. And so I'm hoping to share some work tonight, some of the work from Sister Cities Girl Choir, the Youth Empowerment Choral Academy that serves New Jersey, Maryland, and Pennsylvania, to talk a little bit about the ways that we've seen teachers and teaching artists shift their pedagogy to really center in on the students and what the students need, and using the artistic processes of creating, responding, connecting, and presenting to do so. So hopefully we'll get to share a little bit about that tonight. I'm excited to learn tonight from friends.
Alicia, thank you so much. I'm sure our audience is already just saying, okay, let's just get started. But we have to introduce two more panelists before we can jump into our dialogue, who actually coming from our last episode. Purple, please come and join us. Shakia Purple Norris, who just joined us as part of our incredible hip hop episode.
Yes, thank you very much, Scott, Bob, Chiho, and Alicia. Thank you for the fire flame pass. I am a daughter of Linda and Jerry. I am currently in Newark, New Jersey, which is on Lenni Lenape land. I identify as she, her. I am really proud graduate of Johnson C. Smith University in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I am a hip hop MC, which means rap, someone who uses the voice and lyric intentional to contribute to the collective, meaning us. And I am fortunately to be an arts ed administrator at New Jersey Performing Arts Center, where I started out as a teaching artist in the arts ed department, and now I'm the director of our hip hop arts and culture program. I've always been a performing artist, and I plan to learn how to continue to grow and be in process with the collective of hip hop as an ambassador for the United States under the Next Level program, and a former member of Tony Blackman's Rhyme Like a Girl, who was one of my teachers and our first United States ambassador of hip hop. And I'm a proud educator, as my parents, my stepmother Jackie and my father Jerry, have been educators, recently retiring. I come from a family that valued education as an active learner, first and foremost at home, and the world being our library and our center for learning. And so this is just from a long legacy of understanding purpose work and enjoying ways to continue to exchange and engage with people around the world. Curious about differences, always introspective, as hip hop invites us to be when it comes to knowledge of self, always introspective about who I am and how I participate in as one. Very much an admirer of humanitarians, if I shall say, and curious about the different origins of education through culture and indigenous practices, both inside and outside of the Americas. And so I've learned through world travel and explored through reading, a late reader, and now currently in grad school studying the consciousness in and of hip hop and the Goddard MFA program. Why consciousness, some people say, is because I want to know not only about my own journey, but how come this non-traditional youth-led art form works. One element that I practice is emceeing. And there are several elements: the visual arts, graffiti, which influence graphic design and fashion in an amazing way. The music element of music production, which extends the generation or the length of a song throughout generations through the practice technique of sampling and remixing. Loving the power dynamics, control, and manipulation of tools and equipment with DJing, amplifying motion and engagement of large groups, and exploring information and sharing information through music as DJs do, as well as the written word emceeing and the response to music and vibration, in the language of dance. And so hip hop as a culture and these art forms being vehicles for us to express who we are, how we see ourselves and others in the world in participatory way. And so I know the benefits of hip hop, being born and raised in the Bronx, born in the late 70s. I got to watch and participate in the culture evolving. And as I travel around the world and I acknowledge it, it's American music, American art form. And I'm glad we're here at home exploring and getting more curious about something that's been around for 50 years.
Purple, thank you so much. I think the most powerful word you mentioned to me is intentionality, purposeful, that this is part of the consciousness, but we have to be purposefully intentional about this work. We're going to explore that deeply tonight. Thank you so much. Finally, I would like to invite Franklin Willis to turn camera on and introduce a little bit about your background and how you see social and emotional learning in your practice.
Thanks, Scott, for the intro, and thank you, Save the Music Foundation, and everybody who's been a part of these wonderful conversations that need to continue to happen. So whoever is in charge of that, we want to continue this. And I'm just thrilled to be here. My name is Franklin Willis. I am a music educator here in Nashville, Tennessee. I do identify as he and him. I am a Southern gentleman, if I must say so. I see all the New Jersey vibes, and Scott is in Illinois, and I see all that, but I'm down south here. And for the past 14 years, I have been serving in elementary music, middle school music, general music, choral music, in a variety of ways. And now I find myself as an instructional coach with Metro Nashville Public Schools. And in that role, I get to cultivate music teachers through classroom management, co-teaching, lesson planning. And through this position the past 3 years, I've grown just in my ability to see how music education can look different from class to class, from school to school, from community to community. And what is successful in this classroom looks like different success in another classroom. And seeing through the lens of music teachers embracing all of the changes that are happening in our culture, in our world. And my work is based in how can I take this known experience, this lived experience from my students, and embed that into the music curriculum. I will do a short intro, but my music ed experience, of course, I had, church growing up, right? Mom and pops listening to music, soul music, hip hop, all of this. But then when I went to school, none of that was represented. And so I went through my music education experience, not really getting to see who I was through a musical identity lens. So you get to college, you learn the languages, you pass the praxis test, you pass the piano proficiency, you do all these things. And where did I find myself teaching? I was in North Memphis, my first school, my first year, with all students who looked like me. But here I am still trying to teach what I learned in college. So I had to go back to my roots, and that's hip hop. I had to go back to my roots, which is gospel music, spirituals, to teach the children who look like me the music that they knew. So I always tell people, my first year, I thought I was teaching the children. The children were teaching me, like, yo, you forgot where you came from, bro. This is what we do over here. So my career has been finding ways to merge those two cultures together, making sure our students have the music ed, the standards, all of the terminology, but also letting them know that it's okay to be you. It's okay to nod your head to the beat, right? It's okay to dap your music teacher up to say hello, right? So all of this, I find myself just sharing that it's okay, right? Black folks, it's okay if you come from a culture that uses this music and you want to embed it into your classroom. Because when I first started to do it, I got a lot of eyes. I got a lot of, why are you teaching this? Why are you doing that? But right now we're in an opportunity in a place where we can use our platforms, we can use social media, we can use our messaging to let people know it's okay to be you. It's okay to identify who you identify as and share that with your students. So today I'm thrilled to be here. I know that short introduction turned into a long one. I'm long-winded, but Scott, come on back on so we can get the conversation started.
I didn't go anywhere. I'm right here. So let's bring Bob, Alicia, and Purple back on, and let's get the conversation started, because Franklin, I really think that you kicked this off in a beautiful space, that so many times the work that we do in our K-12 educational experience, and then we go off to college and we think that in 4 years we're going to reinvent ourselves and learn everything we need to do about teaching. And then no matter what, we enter a culture that we are the outsider. No matter if it's going back to our alma mater or going back to in a space where our demographics are the same or very different, there's always a necessity for student agency. So we're going to get to that very, very deeply in just a second. But one of the things that is coming up time and time again in the world that we're living in is that there are so many different areas that are being conflated and misunderstood. Social and emotional learning, critical race theory, anti-racism, everything that we've brought together to talk about as part of this series. There's a lot of people who are using terms and not really understanding what they are. Misunderstanding, misusing, and using them in a way that is not putting our students at the center and as the most important piece of the puzzle, which is why we're here tonight. So Franklin, I'm going to start with you and just ask you this question. As so many of these ideas that we are being attracted to that can help us build this agency, build these relationships with our students, are being politicized and conflated, how do we move forward? How do we approach this work?
You know, at this point, it gets so controversial. You can't say this, you can't do this, you'll be canceled. And I've just learned to live in my truth. My truth may not be someone else's truth. And I'm very fine with that at this point in my career. As a young music educator, that used to really, really affect me. Because I wanted to be accepted into the music ed space. And I wanted people to see that, oh, I can teach the Bach chorales. I can teach the, whatever, the Eric Whitakers. I can teach that. But my students are not responding to that. Day to day, they're not connecting with that in such a way that they want to show up in class, right? They want to participate. So for me, it comes to a space of truth and being able to identify with what is real and what is not. So one thing I can't take away is who I am and how I show up. As a Black man, I walk into many music education spaces as the only person of color many times. I just did a training a couple of days ago, a couple of weeks ago, where it was just me and a whole bunch of white folks. And like I told them, there's a difference between appropriation and appreciation. So you can't say you came to Franklin's hip hop session and you danced and we had fun and you're just going to go back and just do this. You can't do it like how I do it, right? The years that I took to learn languages, to learn theory, to learn the dominants, the half subdominant chords, the major, all of these things, the years, the hours, the sweat, the sacrifice, that same type of energy has to be put into sharing the music of someone else's culture. So when we talk about that political landscape of it, you can't get around it, right? People hear hip hop, they automatically think all of the negative stereotypes that they've seen. They think of the media images that they've heard or that have been in videos, right? But for me, it's like, okay, yes, that does exist, but what about this other side? And I love to share with people operas. Operas have some of the most like controversial imagery, songs, all of the things, but we share these songs with students. We share all of this with students, but then when we come to hip hop, we want to pick which ones we want to do and what we want to share. All music has things in it that are not appropriate for children, right? So we have to decide which one are we going to share and which one are we not? And most of the times it's not shared because it is othered. It's because it's Black. It's because it comes from this culture. So for me, it's like, stop, pause. All hip hop is not bad, right? When we think about critical race theory, when people hear that, they immediately, it's the buzzwords for me. Like when we talk about equity, when we talk about, I saw a post recently, it's like we've been colored, Black folk, underprivileged, underserved. And it's just like there's a list, the list goes on. And for me, it comes to, you got to do your own work. People have told you what the work is, and it's not a checklist, right? It's lived experiences. And when we make mistakes, when we teach a lesson that is insensitive to a culture, and our children tell us that, it's not a bad thing. Take that, embrace it, and don't do that again. Allow the students to help guide you on what is appropriate. And from there, when we center our children's voices, when we center our community members, when we center our practitioners and our culture bearers, that's when we can begin to learn and heal. But until we stop naming things and canceling things, we will never get to have the conversations that need to be had.
Absolutely. And Franklin, you just gave us a lot there. That was incredible. And I'd like to jump in with some of the assumptions that in order for someone to take what you said and run with it, they'd have to know. And there's two things. Number one, how prevalent anti-Blackness is in our society. And it seeps into classroom culture. Classrooms are a part of the world, and our classrooms are not neutral spaces. The other is how prevalent white supremacy is in our society. It allows us to view the world in a certain way, to view certain art forms in a certain way, especially through the lens that of tradition, or it's always been this way, right? Some of these traditions continue to cement those two cultural beliefs that exist in our society into our classrooms. When I think about SEL and critical race theory and anti-racism, there's two things that I think are important to mention. Number one, Dina Simmons, the incredible Dr. Dina Simmons, she famously said to us that that SEL without an equity lens, and I'm paraphrasing here, right, can be white supremacy with a hug. And SEL can't get away from that. We must have, as educators, a pedagogical shift in the way that we understand our own responsibility to continue to learn and grow interpersonally and across the way, and our own responsibility to make more room for the important things that our communities and our students tell us are important, that we center those things in our classrooms. So SEL can't get away from that. But at the same time, what we begin to see, this is prior to 2020's racial awakening, we started to see the same exact states and leaders who now oppose critical race theory were opposing SEL. Does everybody remember that? When those SEL bans were coming? And people were saying at that time, because any sense of, that's what racial equity is. It's a closening, it's getting closer to making our world a more humanistic place. And that's what the opposition is opposing. It's not really, SEL, it's not really, it's any time that we have any movement that allows us to see each other as people and to accept each other and to make space for students and young people to be themselves, and for adults to blossom and be themselves. Certain people, same people every time, the same actors. And even when those people pass, you know, this is a cycle, right? So new people replace those same actors and they position themselves to stand in opposition. And so what I would say is there's a movement here to capture into a movement towards humanity, towards justice, towards equity. And I think when I start to see SEL folks get real nervous about the comparison to critical race theory, anti-racism, I wonder, well, what are you stepping closer towards? Step closer towards justice. Step closer, say, yes, we are aligned. These skills, responsible decision-making, belonging, these skills do build up the social and emotional capacities for us to have citizens of the world who see each other and see the humanity in each other, who eventually will be leaders of tomorrow and transform our world for the better. And that is why we are investing in SEL. And that is why we're investing in artistic learning spaces for the same exact reason. So let's not let's call things as they are. I think that really does help when we see the names of what the things that we see in front of each other, when we call it out and say what it is. And then you have to make a choice. So let's lean towards, let's push ourselves towards this beloved community that we know the art spaces can be.
Woo! This is why I enjoy being in the audience when both spoke during this amazing Save the Music year of growth and learning. Alicia, when you are speaking, and Franklin as well, I am reminded of the conversation of power, identity, and privilege. I remember being in New Jersey, and as we were exploring some of the current popular terms, we said, how can you do DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, without exploring power dynamics, identity, and privilege? And I'm going to say more than power dynamics, because as you spoke, what I thought is the passing down and holding the same people in power, and that being white dominant culture sustainability. And that is historic. I think of the special Save the Extinguish the Brute was a 4-part series that just explored what came before, right? And Dr. Yolanda Seeley Ruiz has an archaeology of self framework and how we can do excavation. One thing we can notice, and if what are we resisting? That's a self-awareness question, right? Talking to SEL, right? And then social awareness. What are we resisting outside of us, and why? And how long have you been taught that, or we've been taught that? Because as Franklin pointed out, whether it be your grandparents' rock and roll, or my nephew and niece's current day hip hop, there's a generational aspect of this power, identity, and privilege as well. Whose grandparent was okay with what that grandchild was listening to? That's been over time. This is not exclusive to different art forms throughout. Some artists get to be provocative, right? We engage people to think and about and contemplate the life, right? This quote, does life mimic art, or art mimic life? That's the unanswerable question I think it's okay to always engage in as a practitioner. And speaking of practitioner, right? Demonstrating for young people the actual codes in school. When we say what the learning outcomes are that we desire, how is that separate from SEL? Or do people are not connecting to, they're actually will assist you in being effective. Where let's talk about bottom lines, right? If we want to talk about numbers of success and the robotic mechanical ways of learning and regurgitating information, right? Memorizing to test, but not having an engaged, embodied experience through learning. And I know we'll get to the next question, are we teaching the way we've been taught? Well, I'll say, I don't know about that. And I love saying that because when we look at other countries, and I'm one of the people that first said in 2020, with many of the devastating things that were said, I said, I would love for us to have a United Nations report card, specifically when it comes to education. How would our country rank in a global society based upon education? We are seeing different countries who did take on, the entire country took on. We are failing as a country when it comes to education. So every aspect of the country funneled into it. Everything from making sure 3 educators were in one classroom and all educators had master degrees. First of all, a 3 educator in one, right? And then everyone is trained in education. That is a societal value. That is a shift in a lived experience. And I see that abroad. I see education being valued, and then I see the pretense, and that keeps me going. I also am one to not believe that education only happens in the classroom, right? And so I agree when Franklin spoke about what we learned in the disconnect, and I appreciate, I believe it was Dr. Robinson and the team in Philadelphia who I got to travel with to ancient Egypt, or Kemet, right? And they were some of the first to create that you had to learn corrective history, right? So I'm not even going to say Black history, corrective history. Who's centered, right? The storyteller goes as the storyteller tells it. That's what I like to say and understand. And so who else was there? Or what came before? If we look pre-medieval time, what are the origins? So evolution, tell the truth. Or why do we have honesty, right, as something that we ask students to uphold if we don't? What are we modeling? How can they trust us when we don't tell the truth or explore perspective?
So let me, and it's hard to follow any one of you, let alone the three of you back to back. So I'm going to take a little bit of a left-hand turn and just kind of hit the politics of this straight ahead. There has been this tug of war in education over the decades between what people would call soft skills and hard skills, right? And then when they're talking about hard skills, they're talking about math and reading, and these are the hard skills. And if you recall, but actually probably none of you will recall, but back in the day in the early 80s, we had this back to basics movement. A report came out, called A Nation at Risk. And it talked about how we were at risk of, losing global competition because our education system was failing, and we needed to go back to the basics, the back to basics movement, which was a variation. Before that, it was the 3 R's. We had to have the 3 R's, right? And whenever you would start talking about these other things that were not part of the defined hard content areas, people would always argue, well, those are nice, but we need to focus on these skills that our students need to be successful in life, not recognizing that the things that we were talking about then that the arts provide and the things that we're talking about now that the arts provide actually are life skills and the ways that students can both perceive, react, and express themselves as it relates to that. And what was happening kind of as we got into the 2015, 2016 period, as SEL really started to emerge, and we saw that the SEL language was really connecting to the things that we knew that were existing in the arts. It was almost like providing us with a language that we didn't really have to talk about what it is that happens in our classrooms. And I think that what we're seeing now, with the kind of the tension that exists, is just the same battle of, soft content versus the hard subjects, and and you look at the battle lines, and it's really the back to basics folks versus the folks that want a well-rounded whole child type of education. So I see this as kind of the same battle, playing it out with different themes and different characters and obviously different stakes. But I don't think it's unusual. And I personally believe that, and Scott and I have talked about this frequently, we have to own what we do. We have to be confident in what we do and not worry so much about what others are talking about, and invite them in for a conversation. Okay, I understand that you're concerned about this. Help me understand what it is that you're concerned about. And then once I understand that, then I can help you understand what it is that we are actually trying to do. And from that shared understanding, I think that we can move forward. But there are people that are convertible and there are people that are unconvertible. And I learned a long time ago to never waste my time on the unconvertible.
I learned that at Christmas with, Barbie and her and our pink convertible. I think that's so brilliant to talk about just this repetition. I think what we have to have this time around in order to win is we have to have what we've never had in that same soft versus hard fight is a racial equity lens. Because while those same people were fighting for the 3 R's and hard skills, they were also making sure there's a racialization to that. They were also making sure that we were putting in standardized tests, which severely disadvantaged Black and Brown students. They were also making sure that the very arts programs that maybe were being cut in urban areas and Black and Brown areas, we were seeing that in areas where the socioeconomic status was higher in whiter areas, those programs were cemented and a part of the fabric of those schools and communities. So there's also been just a real implicit racialization to that argument as well, as we over test and over datafy certain communities, Black and Brown communities, and we sit and uphold critical thinking and creative orientation for white students. And so that has to be, I think if we move forward with that new lens, understanding that there's layers to this, I think then there's a greater message, because it really taps us into the social justice element of the work. Not only is there an opportunity as we reimagine SEL being a grounding part of schools, which I think more people are on board with than ever because of COVID, right? When I was still at the State Department, as soon as schools closed down, my email address for weeks was flooded with Silicon Valley, software with SEL plans, right? Because they knew there was going to be a lot of spending. So we have that piece. But what we don't have is this ability to look at the systemic nature of the argument. And so I think the more we go into it with our eyes wide open and really tap into inclusivity. I love when people say DEI, but remembering that those are all different things, right? Diversity is one thing, equity is another, inclusion, access, those are all different things. But the more we can tap into that movement and see SEL as one of the tools that will help us to create these school environments where adults and children and their families are all working together for the betterment of young people. And SEL is a tool that can help us to get there.
Alicia, thank you so much. And Bob and Purple and Franklin, absolutely. The thing that I keep on coming back to is this idea, and Bob, you just put a nice bow on this, that this isn't something new, but oftentimes this is different from the experience that we've had as students, different from the experience that we've had as teachers, that we've had in our teacher education programs. And like it or loathe it, we are in what we call an apprenticeship profession, which means we teach how we were taught. And this is just a self-perpetuating cycle unless we intentionally and consciously break that cycle. And this is where I want to just provide a space to have a discussion of how do we rewrite this narrative to get beyond this we teach how we were taught. Purple?
I love that. You said rewrite. That's right on time. And you said cycle. So I'm going to say cycle breakers, right? Cycle breakers unite. Right? And that being because it's not unusual for us to teach from an authoritative stance, right? It was my opportunity to learn as an educator came working with Sadie Nash Leadership Institute, Young Women's Social Justice Program. And I often notice that social justice education is usually ahead of the mark, right? And then we get the terms a little bit later in general education. And so I look at abolitionist teaching models. I look at Dr. J. Rawls and John Robinson's youth power culture. There are, just like we're asking students to read and learn, right? Are we going to be student teachers, right? We have an invitation to be student teachers and again, shift power dynamics. When we look and listen to what students are asking for, if we're saying student first, then we meet them where they are, but we have to continue to be learners. Besides the fact, as we age and we keep learning something new, that sharpens our brain and expands our lifetime. So it's beneficial, right? But when it comes to agency and advocacy of young people, let's just go back to some simplicity. Simplicity. Why are we teaching? What do we want them to do? And for those of us in the arts, why did we become artists? What do we love about our art form? This is an opportunity to preserve it. When they have an engagement, right? How many of us there was an educator that made a long-lasting difference. That's the opportunity we get. And so this positioning of who we are on a young person's journey, I do believe in collective education models. I do believe in it takes a village. So are we being responsible? I think it's Marilyn Zuniga, who was from New Jersey and is now out in the Oakland area, sees herself as a first grade co-parent as a teacher. That blew my mind. To position herself and understand she is partnering with parents to nurture and grow young people so they can complement a young person's rise and engagement and access in their life. Whose life is it? If my young people were here, they say my life. Whose life isn't it? My life. That's not my life. That's theirs. Thank you for letting me be a guest. I think there's a little bit of adults, our layers, we land on young people. They don't have the layers we have. We have a lot to learn with them. It does take trust. It does take trust. And what was it like to be young and told to listen only, shut up and learn, sit silent over there, not be able to voice? Why the arts if it's not for expression? My belief, and I'll try to stop here, I want young people to enjoy their youth while they are young, not look back and wish. And so I have to keep catching my ish. I'm clouding up the space if I'm distrusting or if I'm creating little purples. No. Thank you, world, for allowing me to take up my space. There's enough. I believe in business. It's called blue ocean strategy. So I would ask education to look at that versus a red ocean. Blue ocean, the ocean is deep, wide, vast. There's enough. So there's enough space in our classrooms. And beyond, let's go beyond the walls because the class and the learning and education is not only in the room. Definitely before we hit the tune.
My, oh my, purple. I mean, everything you just said, my goodness. The two words that come to me is just speak up, right? In your community, in your circles, in your school communities, speak up. I'm gonna share a couple of like real world examples that have happened to me in the past 6 to 12 months. So I started teaching as an adjunct faculty member at Belmont University here in Nashville. Wonderful music school. They're really trying to beef up their music ed program. And this semester, I know why now, but at the time I taught a course this semester called Music for Educators. And day one, I walk in, it's majority white women, young white women who signed up for this course. There's 30 of them. And here comes Franklin. And immediately I was tone deaf. I felt like I was talking to just bricks. I was wanting energy, I was wanting feedback, and it wasn't happening. So I'm like, what am I going to do about this course? I got to figure this out. So it was a challenge for me. And so each week I would try a new strategy. And so I would start getting a little laughs and start getting a little energy. And then I just finally had to say, new face in a new space. I said, look here, y'all, listen. If y'all stay in Nashville and you decide to teach in Metro Nashville Public Schools, the face that you see right now is what you'll see in your classrooms. So the energy that you're giving me, you will be on the other side of that, right? You will be walking into a space where you can't identify with anybody. And you're trying to get them to go and you're trying to get them to learn. And once I just kind of stopped and I just spoke up and I just said, hey, we're in this together, we're learning. Then it started to shift. And then I started to hear conversations about, in my other education classes, we don't ever talk about stuff like this. I introduced them to Gloria Latson Billings and their mind was just blown away about culturally relevant teaching and about how high academic expectations for all students, right? About managing student behavior and letting them lead the conversations, right? About social political consciousness and having children talk about what they see and what they hear in the world. And how can we make a difference? And so in those papers, I started hearing more and more, this was like a taboo subject. I've seen teachers do this. I've seen teachers say this. This is what they really meant. And so to continue this, their final exam this week, they had to show evidence of what they've learned this semester. It was not a sit and get, you give me this. You have full creative control about what you present, but you have to present it to the class and you have to tell us what you learned. Y'all, these same 30 folks who was just sitting in the classroom, just looking at me. I had students writing songs. I had students sharing just personal information about their educational journey. I had PowerPoint presentations. I had podcasts come out of that. I had kids going on Soundtrap, creating music and making us do movement to music. And these are folks who told me they don't sing, they don't like music, they don't want to do this. And so what I'm saying is, in your space, you have to show up as you. It may be uncomfortable, especially for people of color, especially for folks who identify as other, right? But when you show up as you and you continue on that path, breakthroughs will happen. And I'm a G. I was trying to hold it together, but the night ended with a young lady singing a song called Music Class. And she talked about how growing up, she couldn't talk to her parents because her parents had expectations for her, right? They wanted her to be this scientist. They wanted her to do biology. They wanted her to do this. But the only time she felt like herself was in music class. She could let her hair down. She could be herself. She could laugh. And then she made a fictional verse that talked about a boy whose dad saw him as an athlete, right? He was this athlete. He could be just great on the field, but it wasn't until he walked into music class that the boy felt alive. And what she didn't know was she was telling my story. My dad wanted me to be a football player, y'all. 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, I'm playing football. I'm like, yeah, this is not my thing, but my dad is loving it, right? But then when I got in high school and I went to choir class and I sang, I felt something spiritual come through me. And I knew I wanted to be a music teacher. So having that conversation with my dad, I feel like I let him down. But then my mom said, yo, this is what he want to do. This is what we're going to do. And so as she's singing this song and I'm trying to be a G, all of this is happening. She didn't know my story. She didn't know that. But because I spoke up, she was able to speak up, right? And so those are the moments where we talk about SEL, where we talk about using our platforms and our voices. Here it is in a Music for Educators course. And everybody felt that moment, that spirit, that soul. And so for me, that's what music education is. That's what teaching and learning is. And so when we can do those type of things, we may not see the immediate results that we want, right? And when I think about James Baldwin, I got 2 more points and I'm gonna stop. I can't believe what you say because I see what you do. He said that, right? And so we come to these webinars.
That's tight, but it's right, Franklin. So
look, we come to these webinars, we soak up all this information. We ask people for checklists and for the sources and the resources. But at the end of the day, they go back into their classrooms. And my question is, what do you do? Do you go back to default because you ran into a little bit of an obstacle? Do you go back to the norm, which you all have said is white supremacy and white normalcy? Or do you step into that uncomfortable feeling and say, wait a minute, this is different. Where is this going to take me? Where will my children lead me? And if we let the children lead and we let them talk, they say some powerful stuff. They say some stuff that is beyond what we can fathom. So I'm just saying, we are here. I'm loving this conversation. But when you go back into your classroom and nobody's watching, right? The classroom is shut, the door is shut, and you got your 30 kids right there. How are you leading them? Are you still doing the same tired songs that we have told you this is the historical lens, right? Or are we embracing songwriting? Are we embracing our children have something to say, right? How can we give them a little bit of that and give them a little bit of this and a little bit, and then we allow them to make the decisions. For me, that has been the most powerful teaching, when I say, you know what, I ain't got all the answers. Here's the idea, what are we gonna do with it? And then that's when transformation takes place. And as Alicia said, they become world citizens and their humanity is centered. And then we can make music. Then you trust me. Then I got your back and you got my back. When I hear a teacher talking about you in the hallway, I can say, wait a minute, I don't think you really know that child, right? It's all of those things that are at play each and every day when we talk about teaching and learning our children. I'm gonna stop.
Come on, choir.
Alicia, you want to go? I'm sure you got something.
I'll just throw this out there. As we were talking, first of all, brilliant people. So this is such a great conversation. When we're back in person, let's all have dinner. How about that? And you know, not only Dina Simmons said SEL can be white supremacy with a hug, but so can music education. And it's very important that we understand that we sometimes, why do I say that? I hear so many teachers saying that their students arrive to them empty. They're starting from scratch. A kindergarten student in your class that shows up has 5 years of lullabies, 5 years of, in Philadelphia, block parties, every summer and every weekend of the summer, 5 years of Memorial Day parades, Thanksgiving Day parades, 5 years of riding in the back of the car with their parents, listening to Mary J. Blige and Ja Rule, if you're riding with me, and 5 years of songs that they sing around the house, hand clap games they learn with their cousins. Learning doesn't just happen in the schools, and we know that, we recognize that for most students. But when it comes to Black and Brown knowledge and Black and Brown community wisdom, it's often invisible to the school system. 5 years of information. Students come to us full of musical knowledge and information, and we see them and we say, they don't know ta and ti-ti-ta, so they're empty. And that is a mistake. When we talk about what do we need to do to shift that around, to turn that around, what we need to do, this is hard. It's not hard to me, but I'm going to tell you what you need to do, is you need to center Black and Brown wisdom in your classroom. Because in community, this is already happening. When you look at the teaching artist community, which is where most of our Black and Brown educators are, because we do have educators, they're not certified teachers, but that's where most of our music educators that are Black and Brown live. They're centering the musical expression of young people. They have devised, because in after school spaces and community art spaces, young people vote with their feet. They say, this is boring, I don't want to stay here. And not just this is boring, like, oh, this is the kind of music I want to, but if it's not rigorous, it's boring as well, right? Exactly, critical and creative orientations. So there's already people, master educators in our communities. The more that we can partner with those people, with teaching artists specifically, and our Black and Brown lead music educators throughout the country, we are going to find tons. I see Alice Toy is here, right? Folks like that. We're going to find tons of folks who already have been working on centering everyone in the classroom. That's what racial equity lens does, is it makes room for everybody. It makes the whole space better, right? When we have that lens. So I'm just going to ask us to think about, how can I today, well, no matter what color we are, we're still working under the same system, but how can I, educator today, how can I invite and get more proximate with the Black and Brown wisdom in the community where I am been sent to serve as an educator? And how can I make more space in my classroom for that wisdom to guide my pedagogy, to shift the way I think about teaching and learning? Though, how can I reconnect, thank you, Purple, with my why? In addition to that, right? How can I be more reflective? And how can I get more proximate with that wisdom? How can I let that wisdom infiltrate my music space? And you're going to find, like we found at Sister Cities Girl Choir, by doing that, and Sister Cities Girl Choir is a Black-led organization that still needed to deepen our centering of Black and Brown wisdom. And when we did that, we invited young people to take control over and to prioritize what's important to them, to explore the big ideas that are exciting and important to them, to create songs, to learn new songs, to learn existing melodies. And they're still learning a diverse range, because our young people can sing everything and sing, right? And write new things that we've never heard. When we do that, that's the benefit. That's the benefit there. And the last thing I'll say is that while we have not seen it, we are artists, and all of us have taken an empty room and turned it into an experience. We've all done that. That's what we do. We know how to create something from nothing. So let that not impede us. We're not math and science teachers. Sorry, math and science. I don't know what they do. I don't know how to fix them, but we know how to take nothing. We know how to take a group of young people, right, and turn them into a choir. We know how to take a room full of parents and families and turn it into a circle dance. We've done this before. So let us not be afraid, as we understand this asset, this power that we have to create transformational change. And the last thing I'll say is Eric Liu reminds us, thinking of Blue Ocean, that power is infinite. There is plenty to go around. It is never ending. And as you acquiesce some of your power and pass it to your students, it grows. It continues to grow. So let us continue to do that, but get proximate with some Black and brown people today and allow that community wisdom to find some space in your classroom.
Well, geez, that's incredible. And I look at the clock here, and we're just about out of time. But I don't want to be out of time. I don't know about our attendees. Do you want us to stop, or do you want us to keep going? If you want us to keep going, let us know in the chat. And maybe we'll just break the rules here and not stop at the top of the hour. And of course, if our guests are available, we'll just keep rolling for a little bit. Everyone game? All right, let's keep going.
Leave it to Bob Morrison to give us, the space to keep on going. There's been so many moments already where the chills are coming, and there's moments of me thinking about and to Franklin's point, what am I going to do tomorrow to change my practice? What am I going to do? Because philosophically saying, yeah, that's a good idea. Oh, that's inspiring. Oh, yes, that's on fire. Great. But what am I going to do to actually change when I'm in front of students tomorrow? What is it going to look like when I'm in a space and I'm going to have a student who maybe doesn't look like me? How am I going to be in a space to say agency? What is that going to look like? So I would like to open up the floor for this question. What is our dream for music education? What is our vision for music education in 5 or 10 years if student agency becomes a reality? Alicia, can we start with you?
Absolutely. I'm going to take it right to the policy, because our national core art standards have set us up so beautifully to embrace all of these principles. We must be centering the creative process in our classrooms. And so when I was at the State Department, when I would go around and I would bring this message that we had new state standards based off of the national core art standards that are centering the creative process, my dance teachers would say, you mean let kids choreograph and create movement phrases based on ideas? Yeah, we do that all the time. My theater people said, cool, I can do more devising. Got it, thanks, see ya. My visual art teachers sometimes needed a little help, right? We've all been to the art show where it's 100 starry nights, okay? That recreation model, yes. They needed a little help to say, okay, we see that you've taught the kids a technique. Can the children use that technique to explore an idea that's meaningful to them? They would say, okay, let me try that. I come back the next year and we'd see it, yes? The music teachers would, their eyes would glaze over and they're like, this person, she doesn't know anything about music, right? she can't possibly be a music educator, because what were the excuses? Music teachers some people would say, we have technique to teach. We don't have time to do that others. We know how we are. We know how we are. I was like, have you ever seen a dance class? Okay. Every art form has technique. What we're looking for is to prepare students the same way that our favorite artists have been prepared for art making. Bach, Beethoven, Mozart, the same way that your canon folks were allowed to, yes, learn from what had come before, but also to explore, right? That's why they're your favorites. We want to offer that opportunity to every student around us. We want to offer the opportunity for their voice and perspective and lived experience to be shared through musical expression. So that's all we're doing. We're not creating something very new, right? We're just giving agency to people who, young people, number one, right? Who we've taken a lot of agency from. We're just giving and returning their power back to them, making space for them to do that exploration. So what does it look like? I know for us at Sister Cities, we're a choral organization. We, in 2018, we drafted an art strategy goal that by 2024, half of our repertoire would be original works. Every year, we would be like Sweet Honey in the Rock. And we would sing a song. Yes, we'll sing Glory or then sing Vivaldi's Gloria, but then we're going to also sing this song cycle that the young people wrote. And what that meant was there was a lot of personal reflection, because some of us need to heal a wound. I call it the creator wound. Part of being trained classically often is that we choose who gets to create new original work, composers, based on who usually has had the most experience reading music. Who reads the best might be able to transcribe. We're like, oh, that person, they should be a composer. Instead of thinking the person with the wild imagination, that's who should compose music. Music is not about transcribing, right? That's a mathematical activity. That happens in a music class, right? So a lot of us are walking around and we didn't know, we don't remember when it happened, but at some point we received a message subliminally that our ideas weren't worthy of being shared. Many of us that chose a classical music track. Now, if you chose a pop music track and you went to Berkeley, then you don't know what I'm talking about, and bless you. But if you did choose that classical music track, at some point you were told that if you continued to pursue performance, no, that's your idea. Do what's on the page, not that. Do this, yes? So there's some healing that we need, and that's on us. It's on us to heal. Join, for me, what's been very helpful is to be in the company of other educators and to talk about this, and to create a creative colony amongst my colleagues where I can present and share work, just like I want my students to do. I can present and share work in community and get feedback on my work, right? That's how work is created and elevated. That's been very healing for me. So get yourself an artistic practice and a therapist, yes, with all these benefits we have. Talk it through, and then figure out what are the gaps where so I can learn how to facilitate learning instead of lead the learning. And there's plenty of research and books out there. I would advise folks, check out, I'll drop a link in the chat, but Sister Cities Girl Choir did a 4-episode webinar series last year on this emotional toll that it takes to make that transformation. Because what we're talking about, these are beautiful ideas and we're snapping and stuff, but it is hard work. And it is a reorienting, a new mindset shift to make this shift. But guess what? We have everything we need. That's what we found, was that as much as we, in the beginning of this journey, we thought, how will we work collaboratively and help students to choreograph their own music? How? We found we had everything we need. Even if it wasn't in us, it was in our community. It was somewhere right at arm's length. And so I'll encourage you, I'll drop the links so you can take a listen to some of their original tunes, how Leonard's publishing some of their works this year. So stay tuned for that. But it's very exciting to think about how just those shifts can create huge repercussions. And what will we hear in the future from these artists that are able to blossom and grow from pre-K through 12th grade with this idea that you are enough and your voice matters.
Stunning, absolutely stunning. And you can see the accolades and how much this resonated in the chat, Alicia. Purple, can we send it off to you for what is your vision for music education?
Whew. As I was just reminded when I see Mahalo in the chat, I would love for us to own the melting pot home of immigration that we are, and be united in our states around the national art standards. I am definitely a supporter of that. But I mean, we have so many languages and sounds and instruments here. And so I would like to kind of, in order to grow forward in the future, the origin of sounds, the origin of instruments, and the building and making and exploring new. 4 words that came listening to our guest in this conversation is, where is there space? Where am I taking up space? Where is there silent? How come they're silent? And am I creating with silence, like I would a song, right? Or in drama, a dramatic pause. That is important. Can I be with it? Or am I filling up the space? And then sound. What do we hear? Who are we listening to? But then what sounds are in our environment that can be utilized? This is what I learned in hip hop and with hip hop, and this is what we do. So the manipulation or altering and the repurposing of what is accessible is the foundation of the culture. When art and music was taken out of schools because of the New York City economic crisis, this is what young people created. And if it's here 50 years later and it's around the world, Nepal has a hip hop scene, right? Then we can talk about what's effective and what works. And it has always worked. So indigenous practices and cultural music in the classroom is important to me. So space, silence, sound, and speech. I want to explore those four, right? Like measures. We talk in music. Also, that point in SEL, self-management in creating, one is managing themselves and getting their concepts to ideas. So this is really an important piece for us to practice and see if we'll fail forward when it comes to SEL, right? If it doesn't work, well, look what we had, it didn't work. So if we have more of something new that doesn't work, but I like the amazing producer Ntume's quote, the late great, bring something different to the familiar. I'm not saying abandon or abolish it all, right? And then a couple of bullets that I'll just, I'm sorry, I want to be sensitive with that choice of word. A couple of items that I'll speak of. I look at study groups, the effectiveness in study groups. So when it comes to us as educators, retired educator mixed with a mid-career educator with a new teacher educator, and that new teacher educator centering and have taking up more space because we know they may get least because they don't have the experience, yet they have some creative, they don't have the experience, right? So they can bring something new to it. So I love that idea of a study group with the 3 as learners. Also, I'm gonna play with this rule of 3 some more. As a beautiful school district in Wayne, there's one of the schools that had paired a student with different abilities when it came to learning, a high achieving student, and someone right in the middle. They chose to group the 3 like this. And this school was absolutely arts integration, which is the other point I'll make. I am someone who believes that the unification in that building and that we're pairing, when I teach songwriting and song structure, I am referencing what I know they have learned in poetry and English class when it comes to rhyme schemes. But I'm meeting a lot of high school students that's like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you're talking about, right? And then they go, oh, that is familiar, right? So I know it's in there. I know it's in there. I know they got it, right? So I want to point to that class and I want that class to point to other classes, right? And we cooperate. And when I talk about cooperation, I'm also going to say budget, right? I want to see music and arts education look similar to sports programs, right? There's a track. There's a track, I think Franklin said 4th grade, right? And a little bit younger, right? All the way through pro. Right? And even after pro, getting that commentator seat or that coach's slot, right? So that's an entire lifespan for some. So I would love for music education to have that type of design and strategy and stretch. I do believe in partnering with higher education and those who are doing research. Also, arts professionals can be the professional development leaders. I think also working with local, regional, hip hop pioneers. I'm going to say that very specifically and throw us in there. We have an aging group, hip hop pioneers between the age of 50 and 70. They would love, a part of our culture is to preserve, teach, educate. So they would love to be invited. So you don't know hip hop, that's fine. Those who did it will work with you, right? And again, teaching artists and local artists so that we are all sharing space. And including when we have a drop-down menu for the arts, I want to see under music and under arts, I want to see hip hop. I want to see that as a drop-down option. And I want to see that in PDs as well. And I'll pause there, but I'll never stop.
Purple, no one wants you to stop. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Franklin, envision for us.
The brilliance that was just displayed the past 10 minutes, I'm full. I'm so full. For me, I'm gonna just echo. What if your PD, like bringing something different to the familiar, I think is what you said. I'm taking that with me. What if in your PD, you switched it all up and you called a hip hop station and you asked the DJs to come and open up your PD, right? And you get everybody up and you get everybody waving their hands and you get folks freestyling, you get people moving and you get people mirroring and you get people some markers and some crayons and you ask them to draw some things on the walls. What if you switched it up? And a lot of this is with the decision makers, the people at the top, right? And you allow them to see and experience a situation like that. And then one thing that I've been loving to do as I do PDs and get to do this stuff, I just stop and I just look and I tell people, stop, freeze. What are you feeling right now? And the answers that come out, creativity, feeling, emotion, positivity, confidence, all of these things. And I said, do you think our kids would benefit from stuff like this? If you're feeling all of this in your bones, in your spirit, what do you think our children will do? And so a lot of it is showing up, speaking up, and doing something different. We keep hiring the same PD folks to do the same PDs. I remember my third, fourth, fifth year teacher, I knew, oh, it's PD day. Such and such is gonna be presenting. She's gonna tell us all the stuff that she did with her kids, but we ain't never seen evidence of it. We've never been able to participate in it. It's like, yeah, we did this and then I would do this and then, no, I wanna feel it, I wanna experience it. So when you get Franklin Willis to come to your PD and work with your teachers, we getting up. It's not gonna be on the notes. You're gonna experience it. You're going to feel it. And then from there, we're gonna talk about it. How would it look in your classroom? Because how I entered it, you might can't enter that way, but you know your children. So let's talk about it. How are you gonna do this activity? What will it look like? What would you alter? What would you customize? So for me, music education in 10 years, we have to begin to think about what are we gonna do? Last point I'll share. Our student teachers and our ed programs, I've learned this by working with Belmont. You want to do something different, but you don't know who to talk to because you can't relate and you don't know community and you don't know the people in those communities. So because I don't know it, I'm gonna continue doing what I've always done. And so here in Nashville, this semester, I was able to recommend teachers, cooperating teachers that these students need to go see. I said, I have no harm about who you've been using, but the reality of it is they're in an isolated situation. They got the PTO, they got the funds, they got the resources, and they're doing all of these songs and they're learning all of that. And then they don't have a toolbox to pull from when they come to the hood. And they don't have an idea of the culture. But you want to be culturally responsible, but you don't have the culture. So I was able to, introduce them like, hey, we got this teacher here. She's been working in this community for 12 years, high ELL population. Go over there, see how that looks. And what we found is the teachers have been like exceeding because they've been able to see real life scenarios, not the cookie cutter situations that we want to show our student teachers. No, throw them in the fire because they're going to get thrown in the fire their first year anyway, right? So let them experience classroom management situations. Let them experience a fight happening in the classroom because that's the real world. And so for me, it's like, let's show them the whole landscape of what they'll get day one, right? And yes, we want them to see master teachers, but I also want to see them to see like teachers that are surviving. And they're figuring it out. They're not using the textbook curriculum. They're creating lessons as they go because they're seeing that, wait a minute, my students don't care about ta, TTT, ta, this, all of this, right? So, me and la, but they're talking about.
And they don't care about that, Franklin. Tell them why, because their music has polyrhythms and complicated. They're like, honey, we're way beyond ta and TTT. Talk to me later about that, right? Yes. They're coming in with a high level of rhythm competence, and then we're asking them to come back down to a pre-K level, and they're like, "Honey, I'm far past this."
Listen, I'm gonna say this. I gotta say it because I experienced it about a week ago. A teacher asked, can you listen? I want y'all to listen to this, and then I'm gonna tell you, da 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 da. Didn't tell them what to do while they were listening. So what did our children do? Hey, hey, hey. Teacher stopped the music and was like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And because I was there, I had to speak up. They're feeling the music. They're not trying to be disrespectful. They're not trying to not do what you say, but when you play the music, that's what they felt. And the teacher was like, oh my God, I had no idea. Right? So it's those little things and those opportunities where we can connect with each other, and that saved that kid from getting in trouble. And he looked at me like, yo, Willis, appreciate you, huh? Like, yo. So it's those type of experiences and ways of being that we can help facilitate, but you have to be open. Because that teacher could have said, no, he was being disrespectful, da 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 da. But she was like, oh, my bad. He was grooving. Okay, let's go. So, this is just too much. This is just too full. I feel so blessed just to be in this conversation with these amazing educators. And I will say this, like, switch it up, your PD. Just please, please. Invite somebody new, have a new face, please. Your teachers may not tell you, but they're asking, please, can we get something new? And sometimes you don't know you need something new until you feel it and experience it. And then when you feel an experience, you want more of that. And then that's when the research comes. And that's when you start finding things. And my sister Purple said it, the hip hop folks are in your community. They are there. They are there and they want to share. And that's what's so amazing about it, is hip hop, people want to give back. They want you to do it the right way. But sometimes we don't ask.
Yeah, relationship building, ain't it? You reminded me of that tapping, and I see that drum. I forgot to share beat boxing as a part of orchestra, choir, and I know Broadway had it in the band, I think it was. Beat boxing. For those who, let's open up that vocal cord and that chakra, and to give a little bit more fact on why I see beatbox clubs, right? Because it's an area of creating new sounds and rhythms and approaches that we can document and learn to play, whether it's electronically, right? And the drum mimics, it's a percussion instrument, but we are the instrument. So that's another way to invite those who may not be participating or trying to figure out how. Look at hip hop as sometimes an access to the arts for some and an opening, right? And so also beatbox clubs, because I'm thinking of our friends with special abilities or different abilities, or those who have been silenced, right? That is sound manipulation, or as my man D. Cross says, sound acrobats, is what he says, right? Which actually leads to a career in voiceover. So everything has a career path and anything could be created because what's next is theirs. I have to say beat boxing. It is on record, research shows it uses a part of the vocal cord that no researched language and human history uses. There's more to us. There's more to us. So that's why I say beatbox clubs in every school, because there's some people that want to say something. It sounds like.
Creation is agency. Oh my goodness. So Alicia, I want to reference something that you and I had in a previous conversation. And I think this is a perfect way to send us forward in this idea that when performance is the end result of so much of what we try to do in our music classes, a lot of what we're talking about is really hard. And when we start to realize that student agency, that creation, that responding, and that connecting can be a meaningful part of our classrooms, it opens up an entire world, which this last 90 minutes almost has just unearthed in a beautiful space. My heart is full, my heart is challenged, and my heart is in a space that I have work to do, and that's a beautiful space to be. That's a beautiful space to be. My friends, I could not think of a better way to end the Save the Music series than with the conversation that we just had. Purple, Alicia, Franklin, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Bob, back to you, my friend.
Great, thank you all, and I couldn't agree more, Scott. I mean, what a great way to cap this off. What great people to have just an open, honest dialogue with one another. And I'm just I feel so blessed to be with all of you and to be able to learn from all of you, and not only the panelists, but also the conversation in the chat and some of the great comments and ideas that are coming there. Before we wrap this up, because this is the last of our 9-part series, I just wanted to quickly say thank you and recap, some of our other guests, so that those of you that are watching, you may want to be able to go back and look at some of the other episodes that we had. First, to Pamela Randall Gardner, or Pamela Randall, who is with Castle, started us off and really grounding us in arts education and on the SEL side of things through Castle. The second series had our very own Alicia Lee and Darlene Machakan. There was a spectacular session talking about belonging in SEL and music education. The third one that we had featured Connie McCoy and Mickey Smith Jr. looking at SEL for equity and vitality through music education. That was then followed by Dr. Alice Hamill, Dr. Eugenia Hernandez Ruiz, and Elise Hackle Bloomstein on supporting neurodiversity through SEL and music education. Our fifth series featured the one and only Dr. Gloria Ladson Billings and our other rock star, Franklin Willis. Our sixth one, we had David Adams, who was joining us from the Urban League, and another rock star in our community, Adrian Hill, who is a principal down in Trenton, having a fantastic conversation on embodying and modeling SEL for music educators. That then was followed by Jonathan Rush Taylor from the Boston Symphony Orchestra and Isaac Sinet from Ravinia. They did Reimagining the Orchestra through SEL, and not only did we do it here, but we did a reprise of this for the ASTA, the American String Teachers Association conference that happened in March as well. Our next to last one that we had featured Tasha Iglesias, our very own Purple Norris, and Michelle Bird McPhee on hip hop for student empowerment through SEL. And then, of course, we had tonight's team with Alicia, Purple, and Franklin, Amplifying Student Agency through SEL and music education. I want to also thank the Center for Arts Education and Social Emotional Learning team for putting this together, led by Dr. Scott Edgar, Dr. Urel Lashley, and making all of this work, the administrative side, Kira Rizzuto, and all contributing to the content and these series made it very special for all of us. And also to our Save the Music team, fantastic support on all of these great partners, Chiho, Rebecca, Laura, and of course, the executive director, Henry. We couldn't have, obviously would not have done it without you bringing this opportunity to us. We're so grateful for this partnership. And I echo Franklin's comments about, yeah, man, we need to keep this thing going. So we'll see what we can do about that. And finally, none of this would be possible if we didn't have the generous support from the KKR COVID Response Fund. They made it possible to fund this initiative so it could be free to everyone. And now we have got, these 9 episodes. We've had over 1,000 people that have participated and stayed in with us during the series. And it's really important that we continue to have these conversations, that we share this information, that we raise our field about how to use arts education, social emotional learning to connect to our students and provide student empowerment, and providing them in addressing their own agency, creating their sense of belonging and reinforcing their identity. So with that, I want to turn it back over to Rebecca again with our deep appreciation and thanks to everyone at Save the Music. Rebecca?
Thank you, Bob. And on behalf of all of us at Save the Music, we echo the thanks to all of our guest speakers and the ArtsEdSEL team for your partnership. And this concludes our webinar. Thank you again for joining us, and good night.